In today's video, I'm going to show you the psychology and the science behind urgency and scarcity in marketing. These are two really powerful principles. I'm going to show you a presentation on a workshop that I'll be delivering soon for an organization that I've actually used urgency and scarcity to increase their reviews by 200%, to increase their click-through rates by 50%. Huge stuff because it's powerful stuff. And I'm going to present you a generalized version of this workshop, this presentation, so you could just plug and play this directly into your business. I hope you enjoy the presentation. So, urgency and scarcity in behavioral science. I'm sure you've all heard of these phrases before, but what we're going to do today is we're going to define what they are. We're going to look at the really powerful psychology that proves basically how effective they are, and then we're going to explore how they can both be used ethically and unethically as well, because in behavioral science it's important you understand the dark side so you don't tread over there, because you can get fines and you can break all sorts of regulations as well. And then we'll look at how you can ethically apply these principles in a plug and play manner in your own business as well. But before we get started, can you tell me the difference between urgency and scarcity? Because I know that saying urgency and scarcity, working in marketing or wherever you work right now, running a business, you will probably instinctively know a little bit, but do you actually know the difference? Because that's really important. So the difference is scarcity is about a limited supply. So when things are rare, we have a tendency to want them more here. So for instance, I've got this image here, which says only 10 left in stock, order soon. And it's got the quantity of one in the basket. It's the Amazon call to action there. That is scarcity. On the bit lower down, we have what is urgency, and urgency is about limited time. So we've got this countdown timer here. You've got 1 day, 22 hours left before the offer ends, and it drives people to take action. And this is important because we experience a certain type of emotion when we see urgency and scarcity and it starts working on us. So can you actually think of what type of emotion we experience? The experience is of the emotion fear. So we experience fear of missing out, aka FOMO, when we see urgency and scarcity, because our brains really dislike, they're wired to dislike losing opportunities, and we don't like missing out because scarcity means someone else might take the resource, or urgency means our chance might be gone due to time. And this fear that we experience ends up pushing us to act based on it. So we might buy that item. But the interesting thing about scarcity or urgency is, yes, we see it in marketing, but it's drilled into humans pretty much. It's really, really ingrained in our behavior. If we think back to times when we were in school, when we were younger, I know for sure I would get an essay given to me that I would have to complete, a dissertation or something, and I would get 2 weeks to do it. And you would think logically I would just chip away over 2 weeks to do that essay. But in actual fact, I would leave it all until the last minute, until I felt urgency, and then suddenly I'd be able to motivate myself to actually write the essay. That is urgency right there, and it affects us throughout the life. But to paint this a little bit more and show you some of that really powerful research into it, there is the cookie experiment, which took place in 1975. There was a lot of research into scarcity and urgency, supply and demand and things like this. But I feel like this is such a simple experiment that this is the one that I always teach on. And the reason why is you can basically get all of the learning lessons from this experiment, and it's super easy to understand as well. So in this experiment, researchers asked people to rate the taste and value of chocolate chip cookies. And they had 2 different jars of chocolate chip cookies. They had the abundant condition, which has 10 different cookies in it. And they had the scarce condition, which has just had 2 cookies in it, right? And they got participants to try cookies from each of the jars. And this is what they found. The interesting thing is that participants mainly said that the jar with only 2 cookies in were better overall. But the thing is, what they didn't know is these jars actually contained the same cookies in both jars. And this is the basic principle of scarcity. So when something is rare, we have a tendency to assume it's more valuable and to actually perceive it as more valuable as well. So the quality of the cookie actually didn't change depending on the jars, but our perception of it did. And this is what's really interesting, is when we look at the survey results from that survey, here's what some of the participants said. Some of the participants said that the 2 cookies in the jar actually looked better, that they wanted to eat more of them, that they were more desirable, that they were tastier, that the cookies actually should be more expensive than the other cookies, even though they were the same ones. And this was so interesting that researchers thought, you know what, we're going to do a follow-up study here, and we're going to look at the power of loss. So what they did was get a single jar of cookies this time, a jar of just 10 cookies, but right before tasting, a researcher would come in the room and they would say, really sorry, we're going to have to take some of the cookies out of this jar, and we're going to have to, take them away because we've made a mistake. We've got 10 in here. There should only be 2 in here. And we need to reduce it before the experiment starts. But the participants didn't know that this was part of the study. They just thought this was something which was happening beforehand. And what the really interesting thing is that the participants now rated those 2 cookies after they saw the number drop as even more valuable, as even more desirable, as even more attractive. And the reason why is because scarcity is powerful, but newly created scarcity is even more powerful. So watching something become scarce or something diminish right in front of you is actually even stronger, because that's when the fear of missing out starts to kick in. And this was so interesting to the experimenters. They thought, you know what, we're actually going to do a third condition of this study here. And we're going to do the same as what we did in condition 2. We're going to get a single jar of 10 cookies. And right before tasting, we're going to get the researcher to come in, and he's going to reduce those cookies from 10 to 2. But instead of saying it was a mistake and that there should have always been 2 cookies in there, he's actually going to give a different reason for it. And he's going to say, we need to take some of these cookies because other participants have eaten way more than what we expected. So they took some of the cookies. And what they found as well, if you love my AI generated image here, is that the participants, when they saw that other people were interested in these cookies as well, and that they were diminishing, the numbers were diminishing because other people were getting them, they rated them even higher, right? And so when we look at those 3 experiments, in a nutshell, experiment 1 showed that scarcity can actually increase our perceived value as something and drive us to act. Experiment 2 showed us that when we see something reducing in front of us, we have a tendency to value it even more. And experiment 3 showed us that when there is competition for something, a scarce resource, we have a tendency to value it even more, which is really, really interesting. So, to sum up some practical steps for you and some takeaways from this is we value scarce things more. The thought of losing something creates urgency, and the thought of losing something valuable to someone else actually creates even more urgency. Now, the psychology is so powerful that unfortunately companies, organizations, firms, they often actually exploit it. And let's look at what not to do next. So there was a trading broker called FXTB, and they used fake urgency. They call a customer and say things like, you'll miss your chance to make a lot of money here if you don't act now and give us more money for different investments. And some customers would even borrow from family or friends because they were told the opportunities would vanish. So they were turn around to the person calling them and be like, I haven't got that money. But I'm worried about missing this opportunity. And the person on the phone will be like, well, just can't you just borrow from your family or friends? So really unethical. And the FCA, which is a regulatory body in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority, they monitor financial firms and companies. They fined this company and said that they'd exploited people's inexperience and created urgency just to make people panic. And they actually fined them £276 for this conduct. So don't do that. Now, there's an even more unethical example where I read it and I was like, did that really happen? So the funeral plan industry, when you can start paying a funeral plan at basically any time. And when you get a funeral plan, then there's no cost outstanding. If you pass away, you will then have a funeral that your family have, or you will have paid for, and your family won't need to do it. And the funeral plan industry, before it was regulated, some of these companies basically used really heavy-handed tactics, and they'd cold call elderly people. And they'd say things like, if you don't want your children to face the cost, you should sort this today. You know, they're going to have enough to deal with when you pass away, right? They don't need to pay your debt as well. They'd say things like this and use guilt and emotional urgency to get the elderly person to take action then. And they push these quick sales. And the FCA later stepped in and banned these practices and forced these companies to actually be authorized. So it shows how emotional urgency can actually slip from persuasion into coercion when people are vulnerable. Really terrible stuff. But the thing is when urgency is done right, urgency and scarcity, it builds trust actually. It doesn't take away from trust. And it's when it's used ethically, scarcity and urgency help people make timely and informed choices. And when it's used wrongly, it exploits fear and it damages credibility as well. So our goal, your goal watching this, is to actually motivate action into positive outcomes for the people you're trying to serve and to actually avoid manipulation as well. Next, what we'll do is we're going to look at how some tiny behavioral science changes can actually lead to huge positive client outcomes and impacts. And these are actual case studies of where things have been implemented. Behavioral science using urgency and scarcity has been implemented into a company and they've got amazing positive results. Just for the sake of this presentation, because this isn't the official workshop, I've hidden certain names, I've taken away certain bits, and all those, of course, in the workshop will be revealed because the company would already have that information. So if you see blank spaces, that is exactly why. So let's have a look at some of the case studies around urgency and scarcity working in action. So one of the companies that I work for, they send out reviews asking clients and customers, which is a good practice, by the way, to review their service, right? And they would send them out an email which says something like this: hi, we contacted you recently to ask you to leave a review. In case you didn't spot our email, this is a follow-up one. Would you still please send us a review, right? Basically. And they managed to get a certain amount of responses with this. But what they did next was actually add these 7 words to this email. So this is exactly the same email, apart from these 7 words here. And this email says, this will be our final email about it. And what actually happened was this small injection of truthful urgency led to a 50% increase in clicks to leave a review. So it went from 371 all the way to 557. So that's a huge amount just for 7 words that I've added. So again, behavioral science, small change in language or how something is presented ends up as a big impact. Inside 2, this is case study 2 for you. So they have a research team in this organization. And in this research team, they send emails out to clients to complete a survey. So a survey being, what do you think we do well as an organization? What do you think we do badly? Please give us feedback, etc., etc., etc. And you can see in these different emails that they send clients 4 emails. They basically prompt clients and customers 4 times to respond to the survey. We see, communication 1, communication 2, communication 3, communication 4, communication being email. We can see that on the 4th communication, it absolutely racked up the survey responses. So what changed in that? Well, it was the subject line that changed. So communication 1, 2, and 3 had 3 reminders with the subject line saying, hey, tell us what you think. But the 4th and final email said, final day to tell us what you think. So it used that simple urgency and ended up receiving 3 times more responses than others, which is 200%, by the way. So a few takeaways for scarcity of items or time is to highlight what's factually rare. A limited supply of an item or time automatically increases perceived value. You've got to frame what could be lost as well. So the fear of missing out is more powerful than the promise of a gain. It's called loss aversion. And you've got to show what's in demand as well. Or is there a reason there is limited availability for something because either your advisors can't do it, or something else, or the stock is going fast, whatever it is, because competition proves an item's worth and makes it want it more. So that is a whistle-stop tour on scarcity and urgency in behavioral science. And as you can see, behavioral science, once again, it has that small change which can actually have a big impact. And I thought to myself, even though this is a tailored workshop for people, I can kind of make it a little bit general and show you guys, because it's effectively plug and play into some of the things which you'll be working on, whether it's your business or whether you're trying to help your organization in some sort of way. But the thing is with behavioral science, although it does get great results, if you use it wrongly, you can actually have the opposite effect, and you can really damage the business or the organization that you're working on. And you can lose money, you can end up losing time, you can lose engagement, all these different things. And in the next video that's on screen right now, you'll be able to see some of these mistakes so you don't have to make them. It's the 5 persuasion and behavioral science mistakes that most businesses work. Click that video now and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.